Hey everybody, and welcome to another Good Vibes Gaming discussion. I'm your host for this discussion, Ash Paulson. Today I am joined by my good friends and GVG co-founders, Steve Bowling and Derek Bittner, and we are here to discuss one of gaming's most important, most seminal abilities, maneuvers, whatever you want to call it, the double jump. In fact, it's the sacred double jump. I love double jumping so much, I believe it is a sacred thing in video games. I love the idea of the double jump, and so I put it forth as a topic for us to discuss, and fortunately our patrons agreed. This is one of many weekly patron-voted discussions, and if you're curious about how you can get in on that action, head on over to patreon.com/gvgaming, where we offer a variety of tiers, starting at a variety of perks, lots of tiers, starting at just $1 a month. This particular perk, voting on our weekly discussions, is a perk reserved for our producers and up, which is our $10 tier. But you can find out more about that over at our Patreon. For now, we are here to discuss double jumping. Steve and Derek, I know when we were talking before we started recording, you were having slightly mixed thoughts on how much you thought you'd have to say about this, right?
Well, it's funny that you said the thing that we all love in terms of double jumps. I don't mind them, but I was immediately reminded of something our good friend John Cartwright said a long time ago, where he's not a fan of the double jump. He thinks of it as a crutch. It is something that sort of takes away and doesn't really add anything that a simple normal jump can achieve really affects. And I don't know if I necessarily agree with him, because there is just something satisfying about having a double jump and being able to reach a place that you couldn't before, at least in the Metroidvania genre. But I do find double jumps have their uses. And so I don't necessarily agree with him. And I assume that you don't either, Ash, considering you're like, this is the best thing ever. I love double jumps. What about you, Steve? Are you a fan of the double jump?
I am. I'm a fan. Well, first off, those of you that don't know me, I'm a total weeb. And there's nothing quite as anime as jumping and then deciding you're going to kick the air so hard you jump again. So I absolutely love the concept of the double jump. It's something that is definitely a longer running tradition than I think most people that are about to listen to this discussion realize.
Right. You pointed this out to me before we started. And I didn't know this. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. The double jump is almost as old as I am. So that should tell you it's very old. The first game that the double jump appeared in was in 1985 in a game called Dragon Buster, which was an arcade game and was also on the MSX. And I've never seen it done in the arcade. I never saw this game in the arcade growing up. It was kind of outside of my time. I was 3 when it came out. Ironically, it stars a character named Clovis, which is a town I lived in for a brief period of time in my life. I never saw anybody double jump in Clovis, though. But I find it very interesting. I do love this mechanic, but I do think there's going to be a lot of nuanced discussion around it, because as I thought about what I was going to bring to this discussion, and even right now I'm starting to realize more instances of double jumps that I really like in gaming. But I do agree that there has to be a sense of design around it. It has to make sense.
Agreed.
And I don't think every game pulls that off perfectly.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I think if it's literally just mechanically another standard jump that you're doing in midair, it loses a lot of its luster, right? The best double jumps, in my opinion, are the ones that make you feel what the character is doing in order to perform that maneuver, whether there's a sense of weight to the character, right? Like they're actually pushing the air, or they're doing something cool that regular humans like us could never do by actually, using the air and lifting off into another jump. Like, it's not just you jump and you jump again. Those exist, and that's fine, but I feel like those maybe are a little closer to what John is potentially talking about, where, okay, you can just jump twice instead of once. I think the best double jumps, the second jump isn't just a repeat of the first jump. It's unique to the character and what they're actually doing, the weight they have to pull. And a good example of this that I'm talking about that I'll use to get us kicked off here is Banjo-Kazooie. In that game, it's not just Banjo isn't just jumping twice, he jumps, and then the double jump is Kazooie coming out of the backpack and slowly, you get that little bit of extra, lift in the air because she's carrying this giant bear, well, not giant, but this big bear who's clearly weighs more than she does. And then she slowly glides down because she loses her strength and she can't keep flying indefinitely with Banjo in tow. And so that to me is an example of a double jump that's designed around the characters who are doing it, and it makes sense in the context of the world. It feels realistic in what Kazooie's actually having to do, the weight she's trying to lift. And so more than it just being like a second regular jump, you have to take that into account when planning your jumps in Banjo-Kazooie, and it's designed specifically around the game world and how they're designed. And so that's, to me, a good example of a double jump that feels organic and built around the physics of the characters who are doing it. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Which is funny because the first double jump that came to my mind doesn't do that at all.
Nice.
There's no reason given. It makes no sense, but it is vital to it. And I am talking about Ghouls and Ghosts, Super Ghouls and Ghosts specifically.
Oh yeah,
which is the one I
that's
played.
a really good one.
Because
That's a great one.
you need it. It is like it's kind of like Castlevania where you jump and you're locked in that arc until you double jump. That's the only way to change your arc. And considering how much junk is coming at you at any one time within Ghouls and Ghosts or Ghosts and Goblins or whichever one you're playing, it is kind of nightmarish. Like, you need that jump, and it saved me so many times. And once you get the rhythm of it, because it's not something you do and you immediately get, there's still a little bit of a trick to it where you're still sort of locked in, and getting that feeling of, all right, I've jumped this far and now I need to jump this far, I think makes it satisfying. And, it makes no sense. I have no idea why Arthur can do this, but thank God he can do it, because I don't know if this game would be beatable otherwise. It's already brutal. So, I don't know. That one just stands out as something that works as a double jump because the way they built the mechanics, it takes skillful use of that mechanic in order to just make progress.
Yeah,
That's a good point.
I talk a lot about the feeling of weight behind action in games on these discussions. I feel like it's a topic that I bring up constantly, and Arthur's double jump is a perfect example of the character feeling just right, despite doing something unbelievable, right? Like, it's impossible to think about a person in armor jumping, period. Like, armor's too heavy for people to jump in, but they make it feel like it's within the context of the game world, that Arthur's double jump is believable and something that you could see him actually pulling off. Like, it doesn't feel unnatural to the character, which I think is a huge benefit for it. Because, like you said, Derek, you get this feel of, like, the arc of his jump and the distance he can travel, and you start using it to kind of weave your way between obstacles and through enemies, and specifically later on in the game, tons of projectiles. I just played a couple months ago the remade version on the Switch, and that double jump comes into play quite often.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have to agree. I feel like Arthur maneuvers particularly well. He never feels unnaturally light, though, which is a good thing for that jump. And one of the things that I find most satisfying about his specific double jump is on that second button press, you really do get the sense that he's like springboarding off of something. Nothing's there, but it feels like he's actually, not floating through the air, but actually kicking off of something and continuing his arc.
Yeah, and I think that's key. It's that feeling, like you said, Steve, that feeling of weight and there being some sort of context for how this character, even if you can't necessarily see it, as long as that's communicated to the player in a feeling of weight and maneuverability, that Arthur is in fact kicking off of something. What is he kicking off of? We don't know. How does he do it? It doesn't make sense. But somehow it does. It is communicated to the player that it does make sense within the context of Arthur's world and the game he exists in. And so that's a great counterpoint, Derek, to what I was saying. A double jump doesn't always need to look like it's designed specifically around the character who's doing it. Arthur has a pretty standard double jump in the sense that it's another standard jump that he does, but it does give him the mechanical ability to change direction, which, as you guys said, figures heavily into how you're avoiding various projectiles, how you're making certain jumps, and it's built into the DNA of the game's level design, and I think that's hugely important. I guess to highlight another example of something that's super recent, I just finished playing Kena, Bridge of Spirits, and I finished it last night, in fact. And that's a good example of another double jump that feels nice. It's not the coolest double jump ever. It's not necessarily the most effective one. Her second hop is a little bit shorter than I would like, but the way she spins, she does a little spin when she double jumps, and you can, thanks to the DualSense, you can kind of feel an approximation of the energy she manipulates to be able to do that. It's not that she's just double jumping because she's a video game character. If you play the game, she's manipulating all kinds of elemental natural energy throughout the game, and she uses some of that to perform her double jump, and it feels like a nice whoosh, just kind of a nice little gentle lift, and it feels nice in the context of the game. It just feels cool to do, even if it's not the most effective double jump out there. But Kaina's pretty good at movement anyway. Her dash move that you get later in the game also just feels cool to pull off, and I think that's pretty key. I like double jumps that feel and look cool and look stylish, right? And Kaina's just feels nice to pull off. And as you said, Steve, you kind of touched on this at the beginning, there's very little that's more pure anime than a cool-ass double jump. And so I think when it looks cool and it feels right, I think that's a huge addition to any game character's double jump.
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to do what I always do and talk about old Sega stuff.
Nice. I figured this was coming.
You can't get into the history of the double jump or even the most satisfying double jumps without giving credit where credit is due. And that is to Revenge of Shinobi, which I believe was 1990 or 1991. The second game in the Shinobi series. If you've never played it, Shinobi is, as its name implies, a game about being a ninja. And what do ninjas do? If anything is going to double jump in a video game, it absolutely has to be a ninja. So the first game was very much just a side-scrolling action platformer where you could crawl along the ground, walk along rooftops, but you couldn't do any really cool acrobatic aerial stunts that we typically associate with ninja in popular culture. Shinobi 2 sought to rectify that by adding a double jump into Joe Musashi's repertoire, but it wasn't really your traditional double jump as we've come to know it today. It wasn't really used to explore or to navigate the environment. It was used as a means of offense, and the double jump in this one enabled you to throw kunai out in every direction from the character. So he would just explode into a hail of projectiles of his own. And the key to that was that they wanted you to try to get through stages at breakneck speed in an era shortly before the birth of Sonic the Hedgehog, right? Sega was clearly thinking about platformers having some type of speed element to them before Sonic was a fully fleshed out concept. And Revenge of Shinobi illustrates that really well. Sega ended up taking it further with Shinobi 3 by adding in the ability to just constantly run as you played through the game. So if you have Genesis on Switch Online, definitely check out Shinobi 3. It is a seminal action game and one of the best ninja action games out there. But the double jump, the thing I liked most about it was that it, as you kind of alluded to, Ash, Joe Musashi's double jump fits his character perfectly. Because if you're going to think about a character that can just fly through the air and throw loads of projectiles and create mass destruction, that fits with the idea of a ninja. I mean, from the first game, Joe could already do ninjutsu. He could summon lightning and make clones of himself and do all these otherworldly abilities. And so adding in a double jump felt just kind of a normal thing. Yeah, I expect a ninja to be able to do something like this. Run, take a ridiculously high leap to begin with, and then add in when he double jumps, he doesn't just jump, he turns into a somersault and starts flipping through the air with this double jump, kind of like Samus, right? And then, from there, if you choose to attack, you're going to just wreak havoc. The thing I liked about it was that they limited the number of kunai you had in this game. So they introduced the mechanic of limiting ammunition, because otherwise you'd be able to just spam this double jump and kill everyone, just run through the whole game.
Right.
They force you into the position of having to choose when to use this double jump attack and to use it sparingly. Otherwise, your double jump is just a maneuver that kind of makes you a smaller target. And there's plenty of stages, especially towards the back of the game, where you're just you're fighting enemies with machine guns and rockets and grenades, and so you have to pick your spots to use this. And I remember the feeling of it, like just playing as him and thinking like, yeah, this is the way video game ninjas should be. Like they should kind of be these unstoppable destructive forces as long as they have the tools
they're
to
ninja.
do it. And it really changed for me how I felt about ninjas. I can't think of a ninja in a game that doesn't end up getting a double jump now. And I think that Shinobi kind of started that trend.
I think Ryu Hayabusa still doesn't have a double jump.
He does in the OG NES games, does he? I don't know about the new ones.
Yeah, I don't think he has a double jump in the new ones because it's all about bouncing off the walls for him.
You might be right.
But
yeah,
he also,
I think for the NES games too, yeah.
He's kind of badass, but not when I'm playing him, that's for sure. He's dying constantly.
Yeah.
All I know is he has a beautiful mane of hair, thanks to Dead or Alive. But
there you go.
Indeed. It's interesting that you brought up Samus, because something I remember thinking that was interesting when recently playing Metroid Dread is that you get the spin boost, which is just kind of a standard double jump. Surprisingly standard by Metroid's pedigree, I would say, because later on in most of the games, if not all of them, you get the space jump and screw attack. But this wasn't something I had thought about going into going into the discussion today. But hearing Samus's name and thinking about the various games, I'm like, oh, it's interesting that Metroid Dread decided to go with a surprisingly regular double jump ability for Samus in advance of getting the space jump later on. But that's neither here nor there. Just something I thought was kind of interesting.
Well, speaking of the whole,
go ahead.
I mean, double jump really comes to play with the Metroidvania genre.
That's for sure.
That is just, I mean, name any Metroidvania, I'm pretty sure they'll have a double jump in there because it is just the easiest thing to be. Here's a platform that I can jump onto. Crap, there's a platform that's a little bit too high. I can't reach it. Well, I guess I'm going to get a double jump later. And it makes for an easy upgrade,
It does.
It's a nice beginning one, I guess, is the best way to put it.
And as opposed to, and those can look really cool too, even if they are just kind of mechanically a second jump that isn't that interesting. Metroid Dread's version, it's not that interesting in my opinion. It's just another jump, but an example of, I think, kind of a regular double jump in a Metroidvania game that just, it serves that simple mechanical purpose, but it feels and looks cool to do, is of course everybody's favorite Castlevania Symphony of the Night, where Alucard literally grows a wing for an instant, or a wing appears and he just, uses it to kind of flap up into a double jump, and it's just so cool looking. Is it like the coolest jump ever? No, but you don't even always need to use it, but you want to because it just looks so damn cool what you're doing on screen.
Yeah, that's certainly true. I mean, even my favorite Castlevania, Order of Ecclesia, Shinoa has a great double jump where it's sort of a standard jump and then she does sort of a flip, and it's just again doesn't make sense. It doesn't have the context that Alucard has, but it looks cool and it's useful and I love it. So I'm down.
Exactly.
I'm down. It works.
And kind of the 3D approximation of that I had kind of written down here to mention really quickly is Bayonetta. Bayonetta has a badass double jump with her butterfly wings that come out. It's just, it's anime, it's ridiculous, it doesn't make sense, but she's an Umber Witch. It doesn't need to make sense. She can do cool things, so you don't question it. And it just looks damn cool having these anime colorful butterflies just appearing, or butterfly wings appear on her back and she just gently boosts into the air. It's just cool, man. It's just cool.
See, I personally, sticking with kind of close to Bayonetta, I'm not a fan of Devil May Cry. It's just not a series for me, but I will say that the air hike in Devil May Cry is one of my favorite implementations of the ability for the visual effect, because they have like pretty much the standard double jump, but you see them ever so briefly create a platform beneath their feet to jump off of.
Yeah, exactly.
And I always thought that was so cool that there was that little in-universe contextual detail about how they are essentially casting a quick spell to be able to make themselves jump again. And I was like, that is so cool. Like, I love that there's that tiny bit of attention to detail. But yeah, I agree, like, Alucard's is probably my favorite. Just, the wing appearing. I remember playing that when I was a kid and being like, damn, that guy is so cool. Like,
I remember combining
I would
it
play
with
through that game again in a heartbeat.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I remember combining it with the whatever ability or cloak you get that you can change the color of Alucard's cloak, both the inner and outer layers. And so I remember I would try all these different colors to get the coolest looking double jump wing I could. Like, what color best matches Alucard's double jump, right? And I've spent way too much time messing around with the colors of Alucard's cape, specifically for that reason. I wasn't kidding. Double jumps are serious business to me, man. I love these things.
It's interesting because there is a character out there who doesn't normally have a double jump, and when it was implemented, it felt really good, and it never. I don't think it's come back. They found other ways to do it, but that's Mario. He doesn't typically double jump, but in Mario Galaxy, thanks to his spin, that's essentially a double jump. It has a bit more utility, right. but it definitely expands upon his moveset and makes it work. I don't know. I always found that one really useful, and I just like spinning in the first place because that's how you mainly take down enemies. So you're just naturally doing it. It just had this good feel behind it, and I don't think he had his double jump came back in Odyssey. It's been a while since I played Odysseys, but I don't remember him having a double jump in that.
Well, he can use Cappy as kind of a double jump, as kind of like a physical mechanic to jump again and get more air. And if you see Super Mario Odyssey speedrunners, like, it's absolutely
it's
wild.
Insane.
The crap they're able to do with Cappy and get extra jumps and stuff. But yeah, it's not quite the same as what Mario has in Galaxy with his spin, which is a double jump I really like, by the way. I love see that the double jump hype police are coming for us talking about this. Just that little boost he gets. It's just it's a fun move to do.
Agreed.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Steve.
No, I was going back to Cappy for a second. I don't know what the rules are to qualify something as a double jump, but I do feel like Cappy, like, especially because I was just talking about the magical platform that Dante can create in Devil May Cry, I feel like Cappy qualifies as a double jump if you do it the right way. Like, yeah. I routinely, what I'll do is I'll throw Cappy out ahead of me, and then I'll, like, long jump off a ledge onto Cappy, and then to continue my momentum, then I'll throw Cappy again and dive to land where I want to land. I feel like that's getting a second jump out of it, but probably not in the traditional sense that it's just jump then jump, but I think it could count.
Oh, I think
it also depends on how far you want to bend the rules. I mean, you could almost maybe sort of count Flood as well for Super Mario Sunshine, given that he can technically gain height by using the jetpack, but it's a bit of a it depends on how far you want to bend the rules and what actually qualifies as a double jump, right? Mm-hmm. And that actually brings me to one I was going to bring up, and you knew I was going to bring this up in a discussion about platformers and jumping. Mega Man does this in an interesting way. Most Mega Man games actually don't have a double jump, or at least most of the classic ones. But there's a really interesting example where the same tool was converted into kind of like not quite a double jump to just a standard double jump from game to game. And I'm talking about the Rush Jet Armor in Mega Man 6. In that game, it's a literal jetpack, and it's really cool because Mega Man can essentially fly for a limited time. It's not exactly a jump, but he can jump and then fly for a short amount of time and either gain height or, use it sparingly to maybe like dip under enemies and such. But in Mega Man 7, this armor now, it's just called the Super Adapter, and it now just lets Mega Man do a standard diagonal double jump. It's not nearly as cool, because in Mega Man 6, when he's flying around, there's a realistic approximation of weight there, where the jets are obviously struggling to pull Mega Man up for too long, and that's why you can only fly around for a short amount of time. But it adds weight and authenticity to Mega Man as a character, even though he's just a sprite on screen. Whereas in Mega Man 7, you got this bulky armor, and you can't slide during it or while you have it on because it's meant to be bulky and such. But the double jump, it's no longer a jetpack. It's just kind of a psh. And it doesn't feel as cool. It's just, it completely changes the mechanics around it. It makes it feel less cool to actually do, and that's just, I thought that was an interesting example of one where the same mechanic essentially changes a lot from game to game, but then it doesn't really come back in most of the other Mega Man games, so it's not as though it's like a thing that you see come back up a lot, but I thought the transition from 6 to 7 was an interesting point.
I guess in the same way, how do we feel about Sonic Colors? Because I think that's the only Sonic game where he has a double jump.
Is it? I
That's
thought he had...
technically not true. Sonic 3, the electric shield gives Sonic a double jump.
Does
Oh, right.
Oh, right.
In Mania as
actual
well, and I love
power
that.
up. Yeah, that's true. See,
And
I would
that's
argue.
Boost and little sparks shoot off, and he.
Yeah, I would argue that Thunder Shield is a better double jump than the one in Colors. Colors
easily.
Yeah.
I enjoy Colors, but something about that double jump always felt a little odd.
It's really lame. It's just kind of like a, just a slight little,
Yeah.
Not as much satisfaction to it, for whatever reason.
It's like Sonic can barely be asked just to put in the lowest amount of effort to get into like a just slightly more. I agree. The lightning shield double jump in Sonic 3 and Sonic Mania way cooler because you have the cool sound effect, right? That bang.
Yeah.
And then you see like the sparks.
And you get the
fly
momentum
off,
too. That builds off.
Exactly.
Builds off that, and it feels really good. It's a nice short reward. I don't know if I ever used it to get to a higher. I guess on occasion, but I would definitely slow down because I would basically back up. All right, let's get this ready. And timing, I barely got it. Got it. Cool. It was just more along those lines rather than setting anything up. It was just like, oh, there's a secret up there. Maybe I can catch it. But I did forget about that. Are there any other games that provide a double jump as a temporary power-up like Sonic 3?
I mean, I know there must be. It's just
There has to be.
Yeah.
According to Giant Bomb, there are 520 games that feature a double jump in some capacity.
How do you even measure that?
That
How do
is
you even count that?
kind of
I wonder
like,
too.
On one hand, wow, that's a lot. On the other hand, ever since 1985, only 520 games introducing a double jump or having a double jump. That feels low.
It feels like less than I would expect for sure.
Yeah. There are also a couple of games that I can think of that are literally built around their double jump mechanic, which is why I'm a little bit unsure about, I'd be curious to talk about this with our good friend John, because I think there's some great examples of games that are literally built around the mechanic. And Derek, you may have already thought of this, and I'm sorry if I'm stealing one from you, but the Klonoa series. You guys know I love Klonoa.
Oh, yeah.
That whole series is literally built upon Klonoa, injecting air into the enemies and turning them to like balloons, and then physically using them as a double jumping ability. Like he can flop with his ears a little bit when he doesn't have an enemy, but otherwise he can't really double jump. But when you have one to jump, he physically pushes off the enemy. And later stages and some of the more advanced challenge stages, have you chaining like multiple enemies together and hopping from enemy to enemy to enemy, and it feels satisfying because you can see the visual feedback of Klonoa actually using the enemy, like the inflated enemy, as a physical launching point for his next jump, and it's completely built around that. Same thing with Shovel Knight Plague of Shadows. That game is like double jump the game. Plague Knight, if you played it, has a terrible first jump. He can't jump at all. He's not athletic. That's the whole point. He's not athletic. He's not the usual platforming hero who can do it all. He's kind of weak physically, and so his first jump is just kind of like a short hop, very short hop. But the whole game is built around Plague Knight using his potions as propellants to propel himself forward through the air, and mastering that specific momentum and mastering the arcs of his power or of his potion power jumps. That's key to playing the entire game. And so I think Yacht Club really hit on something very clever when they built an entire game around a very awkward double jump. And I remember there was some backlash against the game when it first came out because it was so unwieldy. But I think the more people played it, the more people kind of warmed up to what
For some,
Yacht Club were trying to do.
For some, I still see a lot of people label Plague of Shadows as the weakest of the expansions.
Oh, I do too. But I mean, when your competition though is Spectre of Torment and King of Cards, I mean, that's really good competition.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you're right, but I think at least to me, it seems like people kind of warmed up to the awkwardness of Plague Knight's gameplay once they gave it more of a chance. But yeah, there's no doubt that it's still the least popular of the 3 expansions.
What about you, Steve?
I want to talk about a game that I'm surprised that I'm going to be the one that is bringing up for the first time in this discussion. But Ash brought up games that are centered around their double jump mechanic. And I can't believe we haven't brought up the game that has 86 characters that have a double jump.
I had that on my list. That was next. Nice.
Smash Ultimate. Like, the Smash series in general is... I mean, the double jump is like the quintessential like beginning of evasion tactics in the entire series. So I have to like, and I feel like of all the double jumps that I played, you know, I'm not the biggest Smash fan, but I have to recognize the skillfulness that went into designing each character's kind of unique double jump mechanic. A lot of them have like a vanilla double jump, but it is, even though you're putting these characters in a context of like fighting each other, and you're giving them, in the case of the double jump, an ability that most of them didn't have to begin with, I feel like the team behind Smash did such an excellent job making each character, no matter what universe they came from, feel like this is a natural extension of their bespoke abilities. Like Mario's double jump in particular is one that I think about often, and how he kind of like, he doesn't just like jump backwards in like the, you know, standard Yahoo Mario pose. Like he actually does kind of like a graceful like backwards flip that feels similar to like when you run forward and then jam back on the analog stick and hit jump, but he's just doing it in midair, like he's springing off of his jump. And you know, I can think about a million different examples. You know, there's exceptions like Kirby with the ability to kind of just keep gulping air to float, which again is another really cool way that they did that. Like you see Kirby open his mouth and like ingest some air so it turns him into a balloon. You know, he's like refilling himself each time. But I feel like Smash is kind of like for low tier folks like myself, like the evasion tactics begin with that double jump, and that's kind of where you build from. You build your defensive game from there. But I'd be curious to hear from the two of you, both of you being much more accomplished Smash players than me, what you think about Smash's double jump mechanics.
I think you said it perfectly.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Derek.
I was going to say, I didn't even think about Smash, to be honest. It's just so naturally built in that it's like, oh yeah, you do double jump, and it's a key mechanic of the game to just recover sometimes. It just kind of slipped my mind. And immediately had my head racing, like, are there other fighting games that have double jumps? And I don't think so, other than platform fighters. But it's so key that I didn't even think about it. And I think that speaks to just how well it's implemented.
Yeah, no, I had Smash on my list as well, Steve, and I figured one of us would get to it eventually, so I'm glad you did. And I completely agree with everything you said. Smash is a game that, you know, I think due to not only the incredibly talented team Sakurai leads working on the games, but also Sakurai's own obsession with the feel of characters, getting the feel of each character's weight right, and their abilities right. And I completely agree with everything you said. Mario has that double jump that, even though it doesn't come directly from any of his own games, it feels natural to him. And I would say Link is a great example of a character that does a similar double jump where he kind of twirls throughout the air, but you can feel that he's encumbered by all the weight of his equipment, and he's just he's a heavier, beefier character in general. So, whereas Mario's like springing and woohoo, Link's like, you can feel the weight. His jumps initially aren't as high to begin with, or his regular jump isn't as high, and then his double jump is a little bit more of like a flip that gives you a bit more air time, but not a whole extra jump, and you can feel that's realistic because of all the equipment he carries. He's just a, swole, beefy guy in general, and got the giant shield and the Master Sword, But yeah, and Smash really excels at that. And my favorite double jumps in Smash, no, amazingly, it's not Mega Man's. I think it's perfect for his character because he jumps and turns on a dime, just like he does in his own game. But it's just a standard double jump, and that works for Mega Man. But I love the floaty characters that, even though I'm not necessarily as good with the floaty characters sometimes, I love the way it feels, just to like Lucas's double jump. Ness, Mewtwo, Sora, actually, is a perfect example. You like Sora in his own games, he flies in a very Peter Pan style. He eventually gains the ability to fly in a very Peter Pan-esque way, and you can even see it in his reveal trailer in Smash, right, where he's twirling and spinning and just flying so gracefully. And you can feel when Sora does his double jump that he's flying through the air. He's not just jumping mechanically. It's like a thing where you can feel that he manipulates the air around him, and he just floats up, almost like he's pushed up by a gust of wind or a draft or something. And just like with like Ness and Lucas and Mewtwo, you can feel that they're using their psychic powers to push themselves through the air. They're not using their legs or anything to double jump. They're floating, and it feels so right, especially with the haptic feedback that Smash does so well and has done so well for so long. I think, yeah, I completely agree with you, Steve, and that kind of brings us back to Banjo-Kazooie. They have that same kind of double jump in Smash that was transplanted from their original game, where it feels germane to the character and who they are and what they're doing and the weight involved in their design. Smash is a poster child for great double jumps.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What about Derek? You got any other ones?
I was trying to think of other ones, but everyone I think of, it's kind of like, yeah, it's kind of basic. Yeah, it's kind of like nothing is really standing out because, you can think of any kind of platformer. It's like, yeah, you can double jump in that and it gets the job done. You brought up Sora before. Sora, of course, has the double jump. Works for it, and that's built more for combat as you just lift up enemies in the air and set up combos and whatnot. But, I don't think Kingdom Hearts is remembered for its platforming at all. So
no, it's not.
I don't know if that's an apt description or anything like that. I haven't played it in a long time, but Mischief Makers might also work with that with a double jump in the same vein as Klonoa, where you do a shake and then you can use that enemy to jump, but I can't remember for the life of me if that's...
I haven't played Mischief Makers. I wanted to, but never did.
Case. It really should come to Nintendo 64 Switch Online.
I hope it does.
Yes.
And by the way, Steve, you were asking my opinions on what you thought of Smash. I forgot to add this. I know you say you're not very good at Smash, but if you're already talking about how double jumping forms the basis of evasive maneuvers and defensive tactics, Sakurai just said in the interview that we covered yesterday on TNT that the better the better a Smash player is, naturally, the more time they spend in the air. So it sounds to me, man, that you've already got the basis of advanced mechanics down because you're trying to spend more time in the air, which is what higher level Smash players do anyway.
Listen, I am not one to tell Masahiro Sakurai that he is wrong about Smash, but I spend a lot of time in the air, mainly because I've been impacted by something and I'm flying away.
Yeah, juggled.
Right,
so.
right. Well, Steve, did you have any other examples?
I didn't have any further examples, but I do want to say real quick, I think the basis for a good double jump, because we've kind of covered a lot of examples of ones that we enjoy, but I think it comes back to whether or not it feels natural to the character in the context of the world and the design of the game. Like there has to be some kind of benefit other than jump higher. It has to give you something that the game feels like it wouldn't be right without. And whether that's, as Derek mentioned with his earliest example, giving you that added bit of evasion, or if you're able to use it to deliver like a devastating attack, or even if it just helps you explore the world more effectively or in a more meaningful way. I think that's really what's core to the idea of a double jump being good, because as much as that game from 1985 deserves the credit for kind of inventing the concept, or at least being the first recorded, I've watched it be done, and I'm just like, it didn't need it. Really didn't need it. The character jumps, and like so many early 80s games, his jump is like his crouching animation, but moving through the air. And then when you double jump, it just moves him up a bit more. Like there's no actual like visual indicator that the character has jumped again, or at least in the MS export. Right. And I saw it, and I was immediately like, so all they did was place items like a little out of reach, and you just jump twice to get them and then move to the next room. It's not a great example, but I think that's to be expected with the very first known implementation of it.
Sure.
But it's a good example of like what you shouldn't do in a modern game with it. Yeah, and so I think,
shows how it's
500
evolved.
games. Yeah, 500 games. There's probably a lot of misuses of the idea out there, but I think that when you do implement it properly and it makes sense for the game, it can add a whole other dimension of strategy or gameplay to an existing game. You know, we talked about Smash, we talked about Metroidvanias lately make good use of it. Metroid itself makes really great use of it. I talked about this before we started the show, but the space jump, I think, is a really great one, even if it kind of straddles the line of whether or not it's an actual double jump.
Right.
Because you can kind of just keep doing it, which makes it like a quintuple or sextuple jump based on how many times you end up throwing it together. But Yeah, I don't think I have any additional examples to discuss. I think it's a great mechanic when implemented properly, and I think it can become something that takes a game from just being fun to truly memorable if used in the right way.
Yeah, I think
Well
it's a good way to
said.
put
Well,
it.
yeah, no, I think so too. I do have one more example that I need to touch on because I think I'll be rightly roasted if I don't, given that this is my second favorite game of all time. But I firmly believe that Okami has one of the best double jumps in the history of gaming. I've said a lot about how, Amaterasu, she feels so organically part of the world she's in, and you can feel that this is a goddess who is working miracles with a celestial brush. She can conjure fire, move water, conjure gusts of wind, but it also extends to her movement. As anyone who's played Okami knows, when she runs around, she leaves a trail of flowers in her wake. It's really cool. It's anime as hell. But that extends to her double jump, which not only looks cool as hell, but has that proper sense of weight that I talked about at the beginning that's so important to me, that feels like she's actually putting physical effort into the double jump. And what I'm talking about is when you don't start the game with this ability, but later on you get the ability. And when you do it, of course, because it's Okami, when she double jumps, she leaves like an explosion of fall-colored leaves in her wake, which is just so cool. I mean, she's like nature incarnate, and she's, restoring life to the land, so it makes sense that everything she does would be infused with that aesthetic. She leaves flowers in her wake when she runs. Fall leaves blow out behind her when she double jumps, and not only is that cool looking, but the double jump, if you played Okami, you know what I mean. It has that proper sense of weight to it. There's a slight delay when you do the double jump, where you can kind of feel like she's pushing off something, where she's just kind of exerting just the slightest bit of whatever just to actually jump off something. And it doesn't just feel like she's floating around. She actually, there's like a slight bit of delay in there that's meant, I think, to communicate the weight of Ami herself. And that's just something I've talked about in general with Okami, the sense of weight in her character, which is Ami running around and doing everything she feels like a wolf, I would think, would feel, and that extends to her double jump. So, I'm at this point, I'm just repeating all the things that I love that go into a good double jump. But I think Okami's a great example of everything I'm talking about.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Derek.
it's been a while since I played Okami, but I do remember it just being like, as you said, every movement is gorgeous.
It's just a joy to move through that world.
Enjoyable to perform. And it just applies wholesale. I mean, if we're not careful, this could easily just turn into why Okami is great and you should play it.
Oh, totally. Well, I mean, you say that as if there's something wrong with that. Every discussion should eventually become why Okami is great and all the reasons you should play it. But
there you go.
No, with that said, I do think we've really covered the subject of double jumps pretty well and what goes into a good one, which are favorites, which look the coolest, which feel the best, which are mechanically interesting. And thank you guys for being here to discuss this topic with me, and thank you to our patrons for voting for this topic to be discussed. I just want to make sure, I assume neither of you have anything else you want to cover?
Nope, all good.
Cool. All right, well, that does bring us to the end then, and just as a reminder, this is a weekly patron-voted discussion. You can find out more about that at patreon.com/gvgaming. But in the meantime, while we would love if you could support us over on Patreon, if you can't, we totally get it. And if you could support us here on YouTube by subscribing to the channel, dropping a like, hitting that notification bell, every little bit really does help as we try to grow here on YouTube. And you can see it right behind Steve. When we hit 75,000K right here on YouTube, 75,000 subs, we are going to give away a free Switch OLED model to a lucky subscriber. Literally, all you have to do is be subscribed when we hit 75K. You might win a Switch OLED. You can see it right behind Steve there. It's real. We can send it anywhere in the world. So, free Switch OLED, pretty good deal, I think. But that's all from us today. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll be back next week with our next GVG weekly discussion. Until then, everyone, bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.